we have here with us Mr. Daniel Fenlason, who is a good friend of mine and a respected leader. And we're just here to chit chat kind of about some leadership principles and sharing some coffee right now. And it's nice ambient setting. So
I like it.
Yeah, we're in a good place. Just gonna chit chat a little bit. So please welcome Daniel Fenlason to the show. Thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely. I'm honored.
Yeah, man. Me too. Appreciate your time.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel, tell us just a little bit. Who are you? What do you do? How do you get such a good haircut?
Sports Clips, a little shout out.
Nice.
Not a paid advertiser.
All right.
No, I have several different roles that I do. Almost all of which work in politics. First one is I'm a division leader for the Republican Party here in town.
Okay.
I'm on the board for Colorado State Shooting Association, which is the NRA affiliate here in Colorado. So we promote Second Amendment issues, gun safety, training, sport shooting events, a lot of stuff like that. And so we are really active in politics, obviously, with a lot of different gun bills and whatnot comes into that place. I do all their communications.
Okay.
I am the executive director of Colorado Prefers, which is a nonprofit that provides data analytics to other nonprofits,
Cool.
Gives them access to new databases, and I'm able to kind of be a data scientist for people that can't afford one, so that they can better achieve their missions. And then I'm also the COO of Victor's Canvassing. We're a political canvassing company. We get stuff onto the ballot. We go door to door talking about candidates or issues.
Okay.
Trying to promote whatever our clients are trying to get done in their districts. And so a lot of times right now, with the elections nearing and all of that, it's just busy.
Yeah.
We're working a lot. And so it's interesting with each of those leadership roles, they all involve politics, but each of them have different challenges and each of them pull from different parts and styles of my leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And the one leadership role that I am most proud of is that I'm a husband.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to lead my family and our home in a way that honors God and is a way that we can be a blessing to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And even though a lot of times it involves politics in the sense that we have political people over, that's not a political thing. That's just as men, we're called to lead our families and to lead them well.
Yeah, it's good, man. I love it. Me too. I'm a husband as well.
Good.
And
I know your wife well.
yeah, you two go way back. No dogs, no kids.
No dogs, no kids.
Okay.
Not yet.
All right.
No pets in the apartment, sadly.
Dang.
My wife is not a fan of that rule, but kids definitely down the road. We just feel like God's called us to raise a family and
Good.
to supply the world with some more Christian leaders.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you said political canvassing, you're not talking about like a canvas that you put up somewhere.
No, canvassing is door-to-door operations.
Okay.
So all the folks that knock on your door and ask you how you're voting or if you're voting or what issues are important to you, or they're handing you information on different issues, we run those people. And so we help provide them with the lists. They work for us. We give them the training and the techniques that they need to use at the door to be as persuasive as possible, but not taking an hour of your time just because it's not beneficial to anybody and usually just leaves the person at the door angry.
Yeah.
And so, we try to teach efficiency and being respectful, but then also to hold your ground when challenged on issues. Because we also only work with clients that we believe in what they're trying to achieve.
Okay.
And so we firmly believe that we're on the right side of the issues, that we're the most educated. We're the ones that have the solutions, and we're just helping to get that information out.
Got it. Good. That's awesome, man. So I can imagine in your time in various different roles, it sounds like you kind of have quite the amount of experience in different arenas. I'm sure that leadership has been something that's been very important in your life and in your professional career.
Mm-hmm.
Or your personal career, or your personal life, I should say. Personal career. I don't know if that's a real thing.
I think it is. Works for me.
Yeah. What are like one or two stories or maybe examples of leadership that you've seen or maybe that you've exemplified that have stood out to you over the years as maybe good quality leadership or maybe not so good leadership?
Yep. So a couple come to mind. One of which I was working, I was interning on a race, political race, and this gentleman that I was interning for, he had a line that he told me once, and just once, and he said, always do what's on your resume. So if you say you can or should or that you will do something that's on your resume and you are hired based off that resume, you should do that. And I thought that was really interesting, and so I thought, what do I want my resume to look like? And so I started watching this guy I was interning for. He's a veteran, hard worker, and he just truly followed through on everything he said he was going to do. Which kind of pissed some people off, because when he said he was also going to report something or correct something, then he would do it. And that just having such a man of integrity when working in politics is rare. And so I kept watching him, and I noticed two things. One, he would get there before everybody else, and he would set up the coffee and the donuts and the chairs and all that, and then he would stay there the whole day, work hard, and then at the end of the day he would clean up and mop. They could have easily hired someone to do that, but I later found out that on his resume was, I'm the kind of guy that will show up and be there first and set everything up for other people to succeed. And I'm the kind of guy that has no problem being the one that mops up and locks up at night.
Wow.
And so since then, I've put that on every resume I've ever put out, because that's servant leadership. Nobody else noticed that. I only noticed it because I started showing up earlier and earlier to see if I could get there before he was. and being a Marine veteran, I wasn't even close.
What was the earliest you showed up?
3 a.m.
No way. And he was there before you?
He was. I don't think he actually went home that night. I think he slept in the office.
Oh man.
And so, and I would stay till 10 or 11 at night, and finally I couldn't keep my eyes open.
Wow.
And so I'd go home and he was still working on something or cleaning something, and that was just, to me, that was servant leadership. Because nobody could ever say that they worked harder than him. I mean, there was other issues that you could have with him, but you could never come at that from that angle. You could never say, well, you're not willing to do this, and he was, and that's something I wanted to exemplify. So carry that forward. I've tried to exemplify that in every one of my roles, and in politics, I've since being the intern, I now have interns, and I don't make my interns go get my coffee or anything like that. But I called up one of my interns and I said, hey, I have a big event tomorrow. We have to leave at 3:30 in the morning, and it's going to be a long day, so you just tell me when you need to go home. He didn't have a car, and I'll drive you home, but then I'll go back to the event. So he said okay, and he showed up. He was clearly tired, but he was energetic and was clearly trying to have a good attitude, and he worked with me for 18 hours straight. A lot of Red Bull, and I kept asking him, when do you need to go home? When do you need to go home? And he finally told me, he goes, Daniel, you've never gone home while I've been working with you. You've always stayed till the job was done. And I want to see what that's like. And so he stayed for all 18 hours.
Wow.
And we finished by picking up trash in the auditorium where we ran this event. And never once did he complain. And he said, two things that I learned today. One is that nobody respects the people that do the hard work. They just respect the people that are in front of the crowd. And I said, that's true. That's very true and sad. And the second thing that he said was, it never helps to complain about something that you can fix.
Yeah.
And he said, and he looked at me and said, I've never heard you complain, which shocked me because I've complained plenty of times. But it was interesting because there was now someone who was looking at the lessons that I learned from a leader, right, that I was trying to implement, and I certainly don't implement them perfectly, but I was trying to implement, and he was taking those and trying to apply them to his life. And it allowed us to have some serious conversations about faith, about life, about God, and he has recently been taking his walk with God a lot more seriously, and has become a leader in his family, getting them to go to church, and all that stemmed from a Marine veteran, right, who was willing to go set up chairs at who knows what hour. And that, I think, is what true leadership is not who's in front of the crowd. It's who has God placed in your life that you get to speak into, that you get to lead, that you get to set an example, And in 10 years, what can God see that has come from that? And I can promise you, the Marine veteran that I learned that from has no idea that this intern is, leading his family to Christ now.
Right. Wow. A couple things that I'm just thinking about that I picked up in your story. That is one that leadership, I think if you want to lead anything or be in front or, have people behind you or whatever, it always starts with self-leadership or self-governance, which I know with our founding fathers, that was always a very core tenet of their beliefs about government, that, self-governance is where everything starts.
Right.
You shouldn't be governing a country if you can't govern yourself.
That's right.
And I think it's the same with leadership. I don't think that, I think that if there's a discrepancy between your ability to lead yourself, that's going to come out when you're trying to lead other people. The second thing I noticed was that leadership typically will bestow something upon another person. So it's like leadership, it's one thing to be able to lead people or have people follow you. It's a whole nother thing to actually impart that to someone else. So it seems to me like true leadership will inspire people to do the same thing. I think inspiration is really important, because if you're not inspiring people in it and you don't bring out that innate desire within them, you're just controlling them.
Right.
Or you're just demanding or enforcing something, and that's not true leadership.
Right. Or it's just a contract.
Right.
You can lead a company where hundreds of people, and this has been true for me, where you can have hundreds of people whose job it is to do what you tell them to do.
Right.
And that's a transaction. I'm giving them money. The company is giving them money to accomplish the tasks that I am putting forward to them.
Right.
I think leadership changes when it's no longer a contract, and that doesn't mean that money's not involved. Because I firmly believe that people need to make a living.
Right.
But when they are willing to change fundamental aspects of their work because they want to reflect better of what you are doing, that is when you're leading and instead of managing.
Right.
Because I think that's one of the things that I struggle with modern day leadership is, how many people do work for you is, a question that you get asked, or how many people will listen to your speech, or how many people will like your tweet. That has nothing to do with leadership.
No.
That can be a symptom of it, but that is not the cause, and that is not the qualifier. And I think that's one of the things where, I think you can be a leader as a janitor, where, when kids are leaving the gym that you're about to go clean, and they see you do it with such a happy attitude, they're going to want to know what is different about you.
Right.
And even though that janitor doesn't have anybody work for him, he can be such a leader in that moment.
What do you think? I mean, I don't know if there's like a method to this, but if you had to guess, what would you say is a way to build that quality in yourself? So like, if someone has been used to leading through just managing or just telling people what to do, how would you advise that they grow that quality in themselves that would naturally draw people to them and want to follow them? Is there a way to do that?
Get out of your desk. Get away from your desk. Now, I say that figuratively because sometimes the work is actually at your desk, right? Like you need your computer. But to give you an example, when I used to be the data director for the Colorado State Republican Party. And there were times that I was helping to manage some of our staff and help them accomplish the goals that I set the goals, based off of metrics, and I was the data guy. But I would go in and try to help them meet those goals. And what that meant is I had to leave my desk and go over and help them do recruiting calls. Cold calling people to ask them to go door knocking is never a fun
Not
thing.
exactly.
It's not. There's no good pitch there. Like you're just appealing to their better nature.
Yeah. Right.
But what that showed our team was, I'm in this fight for you.
Yeah.
And like I'm here with you, and it helped change their attitudes because they saw senior staff coming in and doing whatever needed to be done. And I would bring them coffee. Yeah. Not because the extra energy was going to get them to produce more, but because it was a way that I could say, I'm here to serve you. And the best way that I can get you to accomplish your job is for you to be supported, cared for, and And that doesn't mean you're a doormat, but that means that when your job is done, you don't go home. You go into the next office and figure out how to help them accomplish that job.
That's good. So it's ironically, it sounds like what you're saying is leadership is not only about having someone follow you, but it's also about getting behind them and maybe not pushing them, but supporting them as well.
Right.
There's a dual relationship between those two positions, but both of them are leadership.
Right.
No matter who you are.
Well, and you mentioned founding fathers. Think George Washington. I mean, he led our troops against the British. He didn't always succeed, right? There were battles that he lost.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think a lot of people don't know about George Washington is he had several horses shot out from underneath him. He had bullet holes in his uniform, or bullets would hit the buttons on his uniform. That means that he was leading from the battlefield.
Right.
And he is an incredible speaker. I mean, incredible leader. But he was leading from within the fight.
Right.
And he got out from the command tent and went and led. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that we won the war was because you had leaders like that who were saying, no, like we are not the British form of military where the commanders stay at a safe distance and send in troops. We are there with them, fighting with them. And that is, I think, something that is missed in a lot of leadership. Is you have to be in with the people doing hard things, not just to show them that you care, but to actually care.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing just to send out an encouraging email.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think there's something to say for experience too, because it's one thing to be like, hey, do this thing because I need it, and another thing to be like, hey, do this thing. I know it's difficult because I've been in your position.
Right.
And I believe in you, but I am where I am because I did that.
Exactly.
And I need you in order to do what I'm doing. I need you.
Right.
Yep. That's awesome, man. Any other good stories or examples you can think of off the top of your head?
I've been blessed to just see a ton of great leaders in my lifetime. And it's hard to find like those one stories, because to me it's more of these long-standing principles. I interned for that Marine veteran for months. That interned for me for years. It was consistent and steady habits that changed things. I've been in crisis situations where I had to make decisions quickly, and people trusted my leadership. I've been in situations where I had to see myself not as the leader in front of the room, but the leader to get the people to follow the person in front of the room, or else the objective wouldn't be accomplished. But all of that came from consistent and steady examples of just caring and loving people. And I think a lot of times that can go too far, because I've also seen leaders that took that way too far, where they were scared to reprimand when they needed to, or they were scared to push somebody when they needed to, or they were scared to say no. That can be saying no to a lot of things, right? No to someone asking for promotion or a pay raise, or no to someone asking for PTO, or a no to add from someone who's asking you to do a favor that you don't have the time to do. And so you have to find that balance of caring for people, but not being a doormat. Because I also think if you're a doormat, you're not a good leader.
Right. Totally. So you were saying leadership has more of a, or maybe in your experience has more of a slow and steady kind of aura to it, if you will. In our culture today, everything is so fast-paced.
It is.
So how do you think that, I guess, how do you integrate that philosophy with 2020 that is just constant chaos and buzz and whatever all the time? How do you find that? How do you take the slow and steady and integrate it into the fast-paced society, or do you integrate it?
So I think you do, because I think slow and steady is the idea that you could put whatever situation in front of me, and my team could probably tell you how I'm going to react, because I've been so consistent. So I run a canvassing firm, a political canvassing firm, in a presidential year, meaning it's the most intense year of election politics. with a pandemic, with at times difficult to breathe because it's so smoky,
Right.
with weird weather, and at the same year, the most tight labor market in history, and one of the loosest labor markets in history. It is an insane year.
Yeah.
But one of the things that God has shown me is, when we rest in Him and when we choose to have Him give us the strength, it doesn't matter if you are in that kind of insane year or if you are in one of the most predictable years in recent history for politics. I will be reacting to the situations in the same manner. Obviously, you react differently because the situation's different, but it's consistent, it's loving, it's supporting people, and it's accomplishing the task. And so it doesn't matter if it's 2020, which is just an awful year,
Right.
or if it is, 2010. They are the same principles are applied the same ways. It's just how they look will be different.
That's good. That's good. So speaking of principles, I like that you brought that up. If you had to pick 2 or 3 or 4 or 1 principle that you've seen that is universally applicable, no matter the age, no matter the time in history, no matter what would be a few of those that you would say stand out to you, that you would, if you had 5 minutes with someone and they're like, okay, how do I become a leader? And you had to give them these few principles to study and embody, what would those be?
First is, we cannot lead anybody as Christians if we have not first learned to submit ourselves to God. And I say that for 2 reasons. One, I believe that all of our authority and all of our power and all of our wisdom and intellect and ability to communicate ideas comes from God. Second, I don't think anybody can be a leader if they don't know first how to follow.
No.
And whether that means that you learn how to follow someone when you're working a job and you work for somebody, or follow Christ, to me, learning to follow is one of the best principles that a leader can have. The second thing I would say, and I think this is true for non-leaders, be where you're at. So, I have my phone here right now just because I have it for notes, because it's an election year and sleep deprivation is very real. But normally when I'm talking with somebody, I have my phone flipped over, or I have it on the desk, or I'm not looking at it, because I want to be talking to you.
Yeah.
I want you to feel important. Not because I want you to feel important so that you can give me something, but because Christ so loved the world that He sent His Son to die for me, and for you and for all of us, but for me. How incredibly important does that make me feel?
Yeah.
Whereas I can show you just a small smidgen of what that feels like by just focusing on you during our time.
That's good.
So be where you are at. So when you are at work, be at work. Don't be on Facebook or Instagram or playing this game or whatever. Be at work.
Unless that's what you do for work.
Unless that's what you do for work. Right. If you're a social media guy. But be at work. Work while you're at work. And then when you are with your wife, be with your wife. That is one of the lessons that I was so glad someone taught me before I was married. Was, when you are at home, be at home. And that's true for everything. So when I relax, meaning I don't have my phone next to me. I'm not waiting or responding to emails. I am sitting there doing, watching a TV show, or going to the range to shoot, or drinking a cup of coffee, doing my devos, whatever it is. Like I am relaxing in that moment. And I would feel so much more relaxed doing that than trying to do 15 different things with Netflix on in the background.
Right.
And so when you go to bed, go to bed. Don't try to solve the world's problems in your mind, or scroll through Instagram for 12 hours. Go to sleep. You'll find yourself to be more effective.
Yeah. But
then you'll also find that people want to do things with you, because when they're with you, you're with them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do to implement that is, especially during election year, I'm told I need to be near my phone and ready to respond to things and all that, but taking time and just being where you're at. And so if you're a student, whether you're a student here at Red 5 or somewhere else, when you're in a classroom, don't be playing Clash of Clans. Listen to the teacher.
Yeah.
And if you are sitting there saying, I'm not learning anything from this teacher, either you're in the wrong classroom because you're not challenging yourself hard enough, or you were too arrogant to understand that person probably knows more than you do on the issue that they are teaching.
Yeah.
Or if you're in that classroom and you disagree with what the teacher's saying, don't distract yourself. Say, okay, why is it? And if you can, debate the teacher in the classroom.
Yeah.
If that's not a possibility with that teacher, write out the things that you disagree on with him and formalize your thoughts. And then all of a sudden you're now practicing your debate skills and you're sharpening your intellect and you're firming up your beliefs. Seems to be much better than playing Clash of Clans.
Yeah.
And so, that's the other thing I think a lot of times leaders forget, because the leaders will oftentimes have so many things on their plate that it's hard for them to focus. But when you spend that 20 minutes teaching an intern how to do something and you are focusing on them, they now feel so much more valued. And they are going to take that lesson, and when they are training other interns in their future, they're going to apply that same thing. And it's going to grow your cause and your organization and your ability to accomplish whatever God has put on your heart to accomplish.
That's good. Yeah, it's something that I work to. I'm not the best at it, but I definitely try and be fully into what I'm doing in the moment. And it's not easy. A lot of times you gotta. Do not disturb on your phone is a wonderful, wonderful tool.
Yes, it is.
Is underutilized. So,
yes, it is.
That's a good principle to have for sure.
And the last one there, and this actually goes into one of the ideas of who my favorite leader is take failure off the table. So when you're trying to accomplish something, like my wife and I worked really hard to be debt free. Debt was not an option when my car died. So we had to figure out something else.
Yeah.
And that idea allowed us to become debt free, because there was no option of going back into debt or going into more debt. So when you're a leader, failure is not an option. When you say yes to a task or to an objective, when failure is no longer an option, you have to find something else.
Yeah.
So if you're starting a small group and nobody's showing up, you better still hold that small group by yourself.
Right.
Because not holding it is the failure. People not showing up is a small problem. But once you say, well, I'm not going to do it tonight because nobody came, that's when you failed. So when you're given a task, whether it's a business or ministry or education or whatever it is, and you are able to say failure's not an option, so what else is there?
Yeah.
You have to get creative. You have to go to God for strength and for intelligence, and nothing else. You cannot put on the table that you're going to quit or walk away without an objective that is completed. And if you do fail, it is not because you chose to. So, and this might be getting off point a little bit, but the reason I say that is because one of my favorite leaders, and I know I was making fun of the British earlier, but one of my favorite leaders is Winston Churchill. And the reason being is when he came into office, he came into a Britain that was under attack, to a Europe that was under Nazi control, and to honestly losing a war. And he said, failure is not an option. Surrender is not an option. That's where that famous speech came from, which is one of my favorite lines in history, where it was, we'll fight them on the beaches, on the landing zones, in the air, in the fields, in the streets, in the house. Like, it doesn't matter. We will fight. We will not give up. And honestly, that is the only reason I think Britain survived the war and never fell to Nazi Germany. Is because you had a leader who said failure is not an option. Surrender is not an option. I have to go find something else.
Yeah.
I have to go get America and Canada to come help. I have to get my people so dedicated that when they hear the sirens of bombing raids, that they are more motivated to fight back than they are scared to cower. And I have a lot of issues with some of the ways that Winston Churchill lived his life, but when you were looking to a dedicated leader, I don't think there's a better example of someone who faced overwhelming odds and a population that didn't want to surrender, but didn't want to fight anymore. And he changed all that because surrender was not an option. Failure was not an option.
It's good, man. That's really good. If you were to, you might have already touched on this, but just kind of want to reframe it just a little bit. If you're talking to someone who is a younger leader or an up and coming leader, or someone who's brand new to leadership, maybe, Gen Z or something like that, is there anything in particular you would tell them about leadership or just about maybe life in general that would be helpful to them? I know you kind of touched on some things already, but is there anything pertaining to that demographic specifically that you would say?
So yes, and that's because that's when I started my leadership journey, was when I was around that age.
Okay.
Started in high school. I worked really hard to be a leader with my friend group and trying to turn us towards honoring and glorifying God and standing up for kids that were getting bullied and just trying to be good people. And there were other leaders that were there with me and building those habits early, long before I had a title. Because I touched on this earlier, leadership has nothing to do with the title. I've seen janitors who are better leaders than CEOs, which is very sad. And so when you don't have a title, work at being the leader that you wish you had. So going back to that Marine veteran, I started learning from him when I was in high school, about to go to college. I started learning from him about what it meant to be a leader. But my title was intern.
Right.
And I started implementing those practices then. Because if you say, oh, I'll do that once I have the title, or I'll do that once people are following me. Right. First of all, why should anybody follow you? And then second of all, why wait till you have a title?
Right.
And so those principles and the determination to stand up for what was right led me to college, where I stood up several times on issues pertaining to veterans and specifically their desire to fly an American flag on Veterans Day, which was not viewed well in Seattle, Washington. And so I had to make a decision then of if I was going to stand up and fight for veterans who have fought for us, or if I was going to be the kind of leader that sat down when that challenge was tapped. And luckily, I had great people around me, great mentors, and great leaders that I was able to look up to that gave me the courage to step out and say, God has given this nation, incredible veterans. And they fought for us. They've seen and done hard things for us. And they want to have this ceremony where they get to fly the flag that was on their shoulder while they did those things. And that sounds like a very easy thing to fight for here in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, right.
I got death threats. I had people threatening to kill me. I had people threatening to beat me up, to find my family, to hurt my friends. That was hard. I went from being voted the most eligible bachelor on campus to not very well liked. And I was in student leadership, and I had the title and everything, but that's not why I stood up. I stood up because I had these characteristics and these principles that were implemented and steadfast long before I had the title. And so that actually, real quick, if I may, that leads me to this quote from Winston Churchill that I absolutely love. So he says this: to each there comes in their lifetime a special moment when they are figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered a chance to do a very special thing, unique to them and fitted to their talents. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for that which could have been their finest hour. So I was tapped on the shoulder in that moment as a stubborn, my parents will attest to this, as a stubborn young man who was willing to stand up when I think that something's right. And I was able to stand up for people that stood up and fought for us. Even though it wasn't fun and nobody was following me, I was still able to be a leader. So my advice to those young people is put yourselves in positions now and take actions now and take steps now to be the leader that you wish to see.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, when that moment happens and you're tapped on your shoulder, you're not going to be prepared, and that moment's going to slip by.
That's good. I think it's very easy, and that's also something I'm still growing in. It is very easy to push until a future date your potential.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to say, like you said, well, once this happens, once this title, or once I get this thing, or once, fill in the blank, then I will be XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, well, what if you're actually that right now and the world is just waiting for you to display it?
Right.
Maybe that thing will be attracted to you once you start displaying that
Mm-hmm.
in whatever area of life you can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome. That's sage advice. I love the quote.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah.
Wow. Anything else you want to share with us?
I would say, just going back to your question, for Gen Zers, you do not deserve leadership.
Mm.
Nobody does. The boomers don't. The millennials don't. Nobody deserves leadership.
Mm.
You earn leadership.
Yeah.
And so if you think that God has called you to be a leader, which I think he's called all of us to be leaders in different ways, but if you think that God has called you to be a very public leader, you need to go work for that.
Mm.
David showed time and time again what kind of man he was in God before anybody followed him.
Mm.
Paul showed time and time again after Christ met him on the road what kind of man he was before people started saying, I follow Paul.
Mm.
Same thing with our founding fathers. They showed what kind of men they were long before they signed the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
As a young person, there's nothing wrong with young people leading. And in fact, the Bible encourages it.
Mm.
But it's wrong for us to think that we deserve to.
Mm.
And so when we get frustrated when a boomer says we have to wait, we should probably look and see, why is the boomer saying that? Is it because the boomer just wants that job? Different story.
Sure.
It's because the boomer looks at your life and they said, why should I follow you? It should be something that you look at.
Mm. Yeah, and to your point, I think that, bringing it into the spiritual sphere, I would say that I think it's easy to think that faith is, when this amazing opportunity happens, boom, faith, and now it's time.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue the opposite, that faith is actually, when you display those characteristics before the title is given, that is actually proving your faith.
Yep.
Because you're saying, I believe that I am this, or I believe that God has called me to do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to begin to act as if it's a reality before I see it in reality.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome, man. That's really, really good, really encouraging.
Absolutely. Well,
Thanks for sharing, man.
Absolutely.
What's if for our audience, if anyone wants to maybe get a hold of you or find out more about what you do, what's a good way to maybe get a hold of you or kind of help promote you a little bit?
Yeah, so if you want to see some of my work, like I said earlier, I'm on the board for CSSA, Colorado State Shooting Association. I do all their communications, so go to our website and cssa.org. Sign up to be a member, defend gun rights in Colorado. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I have no problem calling out the truth. And you can see me there. And then if anybody wants to get involved in politics, especially as a Christian, there's just so few Christians who are willing to take that stand. We're willing to vote, but there's so few Christians who are willing to take that stand and run for office and be an activist and get involved, because politics, like life, is just messy.
Yeah.
But as Christians, we're not called to be, to walk away from the messy. We're called to step into it and to make it better.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and give out my personal phone number, which is 719-440-0394. Give me a call, give me a text. Let me know what you want to be doing, because I just want Christians to be involved. Because when Christians are involved, things are better. And we are where we are today in politics because Christians walked away and we said it was too messy for us to be involved in.
Yeah, that's good. Awesome, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for
I
having me.
appreciate
It's
your
fun.
time. I appreciate your wisdom. You're a great man. You're a respected leader and friend.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope that coffee tasted good.
It tasted great. It is the caffeine I needed to make it through election cycle.
Awesome. Good, man. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. Feel free to reach out to me or Daniel if you want to get more information. And thanks for listening. See you guys later.